What up YouTube, this is going to be the patch 9.2 rundown. This is the first real patch of the season. 9.1 felt very underwhelming after how long preseason was, but 9.2 is quite a sizable patch and there's a lot of changes in here, so we're going to get right into this. First up we have Aatrox. Aatrox is a champion that has been dominating at all levels of play. So Q, Darken Blade, base damage unchanged, ratio going down from 0.64 to 0.8 total attack damage scaling, to 0.55 to 0.75 total attack damage scaling. Full combo ratio ends up going down from 4.5 total attack damage to 4.22 total attack damage, and then E Umbral Dash recharge time up by 2 seconds at all ranks. I don't think that these changes are going to be enough to completely remove Aatrox from the meta. Aatrox's benefit to teams is not the fact that he has high base damage on his Q or that he has extremely good scaling with his ratios. It's not the fact that he's getting this Umbral Dash up so often. Really, this really just helps him in lane for trades and then later in the game to scale terrain. The main problem with Aatrox is this ultimate, which grants 120, 180, 240 bonus move speed. So Aatrox is such a big threat when it comes to split pushing and team compositions, and then being able to roam with this as well on top of it, he will be able to outroam basically anybody who can match him in the split push, unless they have some sort of global teleport or other summoners that they can use to get around the map. Aurelion Sol, Q, Star Surge. So this change is a really big quality of life for Aurelion Sol. So they're trying to make him more responsive and also reward Qs that come from a longer distance. So Q, minimum recast time down from 0.65 seconds to 0.25 seconds, can be buffered by double tapping Q. Stun duration from 1.1 to 1.5 seconds scaling to 0.55 to 0.75, scaling to 1.65 to 2.25 seconds scaling after traveling for 5 seconds. So this has a level scaling as well as a time scaling, and the stun scaling on this is going to reward Aurelion Sol players who can actually plan out their Star Surge roaming with their E. Brand, passive damage over time decreased. So his passive damage per stack is going down from 4% of a target's max health over 4 seconds to 3% target's max health over 4 seconds. This is a really big nerf to Support Brand. Support Brand is something who has been dominating solo queue for quite some time. Even seeing mages picking up in the professional scene as the support role. So Brand is definitely a really big abuser of this, but of course, in the mid lane, he's going to be getting more items, so the AP is going to make up for this. This is definitely a targeted nerf to Support Brand. Cassiopeia, W Miasma, cooldown 18 to 14 seconds, now being moved from 18 to 16 seconds. And then damage per second, 20 to 80 scaling, down to 20 to 60 scaling. Max damage from 100 to 400 scaling to 100 to 300 scaling. So they're really shifting power away from her W here. They're trying to reward Cassiopeia players who get in with their Qs and can land their Es to follow up. They don't want Cassiopeia to be able to rely on her W as a form of poke or as a form of sustained burst to allow multiple Es. Moving the cooldown up 2 seconds at max rank. I mean, Cassiopeia is not maxing W. That's probably a last max. I know that she maxes Q first, and she's probably going to max E second. This just further incentivizes her to max E second. There's basically no situation now where you want to max this ability just for 0.5 seconds cooldown at each rank. Damage per second going down by 20 at max rank. Again, this is a level 16 or a level 17 or a level 18 type of level up. So I don't see this being a very big change for her. Max damage, unchanged at the base rank, down 100 at max rank. If you're getting late enough in the game where you actually have this at max rank, you have enough AP to make up for this. So this is not a big change to Cassiopeia. I'm going to call this a placebo nerf. Moving on, Galio. So Galio is a champion who they shifted a lot of identity around for him. He was traditionally an anti-mage tank, and then on this last patch they're trying to make tanks more viable in solo play, so they moved a lot of his tankiness into damage instead, and I think that they really overshot his numbers. Apparently they agree with me. So Q, Winds of War, costs 70 to 90 mana scaling to 80 to 120 mana scaling. This is really huge because Q is his ability that he maxes first in lane, so 10 mana at rank 1, scaling to 30 mana at rank 5, so that level 9, he's definitely going to be losing a lot more in lane. He's going to make up for some of that with his itemization. He likes opting into the Eternity passive on his items, so he's going to get some of this back, but definitely 30 mana is really, really big at level 9. And then Wind Blast damage, 70 to 230 scaling, down to 70 to 210 scaling, so he's losing 20 flat damage at level 9. Wind Blast ratio, 0.9 ability power down to 0.75 ability power. This is another damage nerf on this Q, wins 4. Tornado ratio, 4% targets max health per 100 ability power, down to 2% per 100 ability power, base 6% max health damage unchanged. So they're hitting the base damage, they're hitting the mana cost, they're hitting the scaling. This is definitely going to affect his ability to trade in lane. It definitely won't change the fact that he's still going to be a relatively strong champion. He's just not going to be quite as overtuned at this point. Then the E Justice Punch, base damage down at 20, and then scaling back up to the 220 at max rank. Losing 20 damage is definitely noticeable at rank 1. It's not the thing that you're maxing first, so you're just going to be taking 20 damage off of your combo flat. However, once you do start getting points near E, the damage will return to the threshold that you were previously used to. Overall, I think this is a really, really nice change to Galio. He was definitely a little bit overtuned with the Q, so they're going to scale that back. And then Justice Punch, I mean, they're going to take away his early laning pressure, but give it back to him later, so this is completely fine. Irelia. Irelia is another champion who's been seeing a lot of solo and professional play, and a lot of success in her flex rolls, so let's see, passive Ionian Fervor, removed Shield Breaker. Irelia no longer deals bonus magic damage to shields at max stacks. This is completely okay. Irelia is a champion who kind of suffers from something that a lot of the recent reworks and re-releases of champions have gone, which is these champions have so much built into their kit that it's very hard to balance them around their numbers because they have so much other things going on and so many abilities that affect champion interactions inside of the lane and inside of the game later on. So removing the shield breaker is going to make it easier to balance Irelia without keeping the thought in mind that she will deal these bonus damage to shields. Q Blaze Surge. So they're changing the damage on Blaze Surge versus minions. So they're switching this from double damage to a flat bonus, which is going to end up being 45 to 105 scaling instead of the previous damage bonuses that it had. So I actually did the math on this one here. And this is basically what I'm finding. So these are the old numbers, these are the new numbers, and this is her attack damage at levels 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, and then with an additional 50 attack damage just to throw in a couple different scenarios to kind of see how this scales. 50 attack damage is what she would be getting from Tiamat and Triforce, which is her early core items. So her old Q damage is going to be dealing anywhere from 85 to 180 damage. With the attack damage factored in, somewhere between 145 and 240 damage. With this new scaling, she's going to be looking at 87 to 165 without attack damage. So these are early levels. Obviously, she comes into lane with a Corrupting Potion. If she doesn't opt into damage and runes masteries, then she's not going to be benefiting from this AD. However, even getting this 50 AD core, it's only going to give her the 117 to 195. So you can see that this really starts to affect her damage to minions later on. Obviously, this is not going to affect damage to champions. This doesn't factor in masteries. This doesn't factor in Conqueror. This doesn't factor in any weird or wonky itemization that she'll choose to be taking at the time. So I don't think that's going to necessarily affect her ability to do what she does in terms of team fights, but it definitely will impact her ability to set up trades within the lane. Then R, Vanguard's Edge, duration 2.5 to 3.5 seconds scaling, down to 2.5 seconds at all ranks. Remove Disarm. Enemies who pass through the wall are no longer disarmed. So this was a form of CC that a lot of people were really against when it first came out. Typically, Riot has moved in the direction of Typically, Riot has moved in the direction of disallowing champions who don't provide you reasonable counterplay. And Irelia's R disarm kind of felt like that in certain circumstances. If she happened to be able to dive onto an AD carry or onto a melee AD champion, she was basically able to completely nullify their ability to fight back, and at that point the only option that they had was to run. So she's going to no longer be disarming opponents, giving them the opportunity to fight back. However, they're giving her an additional 30% on the slow from the wall, and giving a little bit extra damage on this. So 50 damage at rank 1 and 100 damage at rank 3. This is really, really huge because the effects of the slow will last for 1.5 seconds. So even though you're not going to be disarmed anymore and slowed down, you're just going to be slowed. The slow is significantly stronger, and that's basically going to remove your ability to escape. So Irelia, in this case, is now moving in the direction of something like a Master Yi, where if he gets on you, you're not really going to be able to get away from him unless you have the ability to lock him up. Irelia is now going to be the same way. With a 90% slow, running from her is not really going to be an option. So you're going to have to find a way to CC and burst her down. Jarvan 4. So Jarvan, Prince of the Jungle, is a champion that we really haven't been seeing too often. And after this change, it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing him very much more. So they're giving him 5% more attack damage on his E on the passive, which stacks again once he throws the flag. So it's going to be 5% attack speed at all ranks. I don't see this being enough to affect Jarvan. Obviously, I don't know what an additional 10% attack speed could do for his clears. Maybe it makes him viable. Maybe it makes him a stronger level 2 opponent and allows him to get into the river to contest Scuttle Crabs a little bit quicker. Maybe it allows him to set up something else in a gank, having an additional 5% that he can drop a flag on. I think that this is a very small change. I think this is a placebo buff, but a welcome buff nonetheless, because it's been a long time since we've seen Jarvan. However, I just don't anticipate this being enough to single-handedly propel him back into the meta. So Jax. Jax is a champion who he was released and then he wasn't touched for a very long time. People considered him one of the best release champions because once he was balanced, he was perfectly balanced for seasons and seasons and seasons on end. No matter what itemization changes it's gone through, Jax has always found a way to stay relevant and stay balanced. So lately, he's been getting a lot of hate in the community, and Riot has responded by very subtle nerfs to the champion. We're going to see that again here. So his base attack damage down from basically 70 to 68, so losing 2 attack damage as a base. And then his Q leap strike down 15 damage at all ranks. This is not the worst for Jax, so they're targeting his early game to improve the way that he has to scale. So Jax is a champion who, if he starts snowballing a lane that he can gain an advantage in, then he can be very difficult to stop. So they're going to slow down his roll and force him to ramp up a little bit more before he becomes Jax. The base changes, obviously this is going to affect his synergy with Spellblade and with Triforce, so losing 2 base AD isn't the best for him. However, it isn't that much. Losing the 15 damage on the Leaf Strike is a little bit unfortunate because these days he's maxing Debut. However, his bonus ratios are not being affected, so overall it shouldn't affect him too much. It will definitely lose out on some damage in the early trades, but what can you do? So moving on to Kassadin. We're playing into Kassadin's anti-magic theme by opening up a weakness to physical damage lane bullies. So Kassadin is another champion who's become extremely strong in the last couple patches. So rather than try to hit the champion himself, they're just going to try to open up the opportunity for a little bit more counterplay inside of champion select. The only thing that I don't really like about this type of a change is that if Kassadin has second pick or a team in competitive has priority to pick a mid laner, Kassadin can always be a response to a non-AD mid, and that just feels bad. Like in champ select, it kind of feels if you happen to pick a magic damage champion and then Kassadin gets locked in, it just feels bad because you still don't have a way to necessarily interact with him. However, base armor down from 23.376 down to 19. Armor growth stat from 3.2 down to 2.8. So he's going to be losing about 4 base armor. This is really, really big. I mean, 19 is extremely low for a base armor stat, so he's going to be coming into the game very susceptible to lane minions in particular. Castellan is a champion who likes to poke with his Q, and because of the changes last season where targeted spells draw minion aggro, he's going to be taking a lot more harass inside of the early lane because of the minion damage, and his armor growth going down by 4 as well. This is definitely going to affect the amount of damage that he can take inside of the lane. It's definitely going to open up opportunities for Talon to come back into the meta. Castellan is a very popular pick right now, so we can see responses from Talon and Zed, maybe even mid lane Renekton, which is a little bit of a niche pick right now, but it seems to be improving in popularity, and there's been no response by Riot to discourage that so far. One thing to note is that Castellan does like to itemize into Zhonya's Hourglass in certain circumstances, maybe a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, depending on the flow of the game. So just picking up a single cloth armor and sitting on it for the early game will completely nullify these nerfs to him as well. However, I know Castellan right now likes to go the tier build into a Ludens, and those are very expensive items that take a long time to charge up. So it's not going to be the best for him to have to spend 300 gold early, but if he does it, he does get out of these nerfs. So Kayn. So Kayn is a champion that personally I really like. I think that he's well designed, and I think that he's relatively balanced. However, he definitely needs these quality of life changes. So they're changing passive Darkened Scythe. Basically, this is a lot of text, but what it means is he no longer has the ambiguity that he did in the past. If you were a Kayn main, you pretty much eventually figure out, okay, if these types of attacks against these champions, this many autos, this many ability hits, and I can turn into either Rost or Darken. These days it's much more easy, it's much more intuitive, so it's going to encourage players who aren't Kayn mains to get into this champion because he's going to be much more pick up and play than he used to be. It very obviously tells you now, okay, this is the transformation that's coming, this is the progress that you're earning towards it, and it doesn't hide one progression behind the other. So if you were predominantly going to turn, say, into Rost, it wouldn't show you your progression towards Darken. Now, all of the damage that you deal to champions is going to count towards both at the same time. And then the damage that so the transformation, I'll just go ahead and read this. So the transformation threshold, 400 points per champion type, up to 500 from any champion type, offsetting the rate increase from combining transformation progress. So what this basically is instead of having to deal 400 points per specific like ranged or melee, now he just has to deal 500 points of total damage overall to unlock his transformation. And then it's the type that he's dealt more damage to that he unlocks immediately. So Shadow Step. Kayn can now recall before Shadow Step expires, as long as he still isn't in terrain. This is a really nice quality of life. And then Umbral Trespass, giving Shadow Assassin Kayn a better shot at escaping sticky situations. Exit dash from 300 range to 300 to 500 range based on Shadow Assassin Kayn's cursor position. So this is giving Shadow Assassin a little bit more, Blue Kayn a little bit more mobility, which is something that Blue Kayn really likes, so that's a good change. A couple bug fixes as well, so a lot of love for this champion. It's a champion that I'm a really big fan of as well, so always glad to see this type of stuff. Neeko. So Neeko is still in a place where she can be extremely balanced because there's not a lot of game data. However, Riot is starting to move in directions to switch this champion up a little bit. So W, Shape Splitter. Clone and haste duration from 2 seconds up to 3 seconds now. Stealth duration is still only 0.5 seconds, and Neeko's clone now travels in the target direction until it runs into terrain rather than pathing to the target location. So this is a lot better. As a Neeko player, you don't have to necessarily plan out where you want the clone to run. You can just hit a direction, boom, have it run off that way until it hits terrain, and you can be gone. And then our Pop Blossom, the slow is being removed. Enemies in Pop Blossom's radius are no longer slowed by 40%. However, the jump time is now being decreased from 0.75 to 0.6 seconds. This is perfectly okay with me. When I first saw this champion come out, I was thinking, why should somebody get a Nunu ultimate with basically his damage and a slow attached to it, except doesn't have to be charged up, and it doesn't even have to be telegraphed to enemies because this is hidden if Nico is camouflaged. So I really like this change. It gives opponents the ability to get out of this circle if they happen to see it a little bit better, but still decreases the jump time, so Nico players have an opportunity to exercise this ability and plan for this with a little bit more fluidity. So this is a nice change to Nico. Ornn. So Ornn is a champion that Riot seems to really like, and they give this champion a lot of attention, and they did so on the last patch, moving some of his tankiness into damage as part of their sweeping changes to make tanks more viable in solo play and less reliant on team play. So I guess they're saying right now players are struggling in lane without Bellows Breath's shield, so we're giving them some more baseline tankiness. Health is going up by about 25 base health, and armor is going up by about 3 base armor. This is something that I wish that they would have sat on this change a little bit more. Whenever you take a champion like Ornn, who is known as a hardline tank, and suddenly turn him into a damage dealer and a more trade or duelist focused champion, you're taking away his identity, and players have to find a rebalance to his playstyle. I don't think that you can just slap these types of stats on a champion and suddenly just say like, okay, like now Ornn will win pretty much every melee lane that he faces. I really wish that they gave players a little bit more time to adjust to his new playstyle instead of doing what seems to be hand-holding. Rakan. So base armor down from 33 to 29. This is really nice. This will make him more susceptible to poke in the lane. And then changes to W and R. So W grand entrance dash speed 2050 plus 30% of Rakan's movement speed down to 1400 plus 45 or 80 with unupgraded and upgraded boots. So W's grand entrance, the move speed is going down significantly. You can see that it's dropping 650 as a base, and then as well, it's not getting this 30% anymore. Now it's only getting 45 or 80 depending on his boot status. This is really, really big with his combos with R, which is what Riot was specifically trying to hit. However, the effect delay before the knockup is going down from 0.5 to 0.35 seconds. So it means that Rakan will be way less reliable on the RW initiation. However, his initial W will still be stronger. This is going to be pre-6 buff, post-6 nerf. So in his lane, he'll still be pretty good at the early levels. He'll even have more reliable knockups to set up CC for the jungler, any sort of ganks, or just his AD carry. However, his synergy with his R is going down significantly. And then R, the quickness bug fix a bug that caused the quickness to sometimes not affect Rakan's basic attack target. So this is a really nice bug fix. This was a pretty annoying thing to see happen in games. Moving on, Shyvana. Shyvana's a champion that we really haven't been seeing too much of. So passive Fury of the Dragonborn, bonus damage to dragons up from 10% to 20%, and E Flame Breath, mark damage 2.5% of target's max health up to 3.25% of target's max health. So I have a couple problems with these changes. Number one, it doesn't affect any of the issues of why Shyvana is bad. Dragons who are going to be prioritized no matter the jungler, so giving her bonus damage to dragons isn't going to affect her ability to affect the game at all. And then the Flame Breath, max health increasing. I mean, this is nice, and it's going to be nice for her ganks, but here's the problem. Riot has been moving in the direction lately of tanks shouldn't be quite as tanky, and that will make them less reliable on a team and more able to solo carry games or have a bigger agency inside of games. However, whenever you introduce a lot of changes, like introducing Aatrox, who has a new form of CC or whatever you want to consider it, mutilation, where he cuts self-shields and self-healing, and Shyvana, where you're increasing this max health damage, and other champions who have these types of effects, what you're really doing is introducing more tank-busting stats into the game, as at the same time that you're trying to move tanks to be less tanky. So overall, this is increasing and contributing to the damage creep in the game that a lot of people are talking about right now. So number one, this doesn't address the problems with this champion at all. And number two, it just introduces more issues into the game that people are already talking about right now. So this change, really don't like this change. Shyvana probably needs a significant change in the meta to be able to come back. Tom Kench. Our Abyssal Voyage, allies in combat with enemy champions can no longer jump into Abyssal Voyage. So this is pretty nice. R was always meant to be used as a semi-global roaming tool, or as a mechanism to gain the upper hand in a team fight. It was never intended to be used as just a get out of jail free card when the W is off cooldown. So this is okay. Urgot. So Urgot, like Aatrox, is a champion who's been seeing extremely high levels of play in competitive, and he's still dominating the solo queue scene. So let's see about this. Base stats, armor from 39 down to 36. This is a pretty big armor hit in the early game. Q corrosive charge cost 50 mana up to 60 mana. So he's going to have significantly more mana costs inside of the lane. This is okay though, because he typically starts corrupting pot anyway, so he's going to definitely have a lot of free mana inside of that pot after his first back. Even his second back, that pot is still going to find a lot of agency. However, it's nice to get a small mana increase. It did feel sometimes like Urgot was a difficult champion to play against because it felt like he could just spam you forever. W Purge, cooldown up from 13 to 9 seconds scaling to 17 to 9 seconds scaling. So this really hurts Urgot a lot inside of the lane, and the reason for that is that most of the time he's maxing Q for the poke, so he's not maxing W. So at rank 1, the cooldown is going from 13 to 17 seconds. This is really big, because champions who can find windows of opportunity to attack Urgot and whittle him down are the champions who can find ways to beat Urgot in lane. So him not having his purge for an additional 4 seconds is going to open up a lot of opportunity for opponents to get in his face and push him out of the lane. It does scale down to 9 seconds, so overall, Urgot's not going to play the same, or Urgot is going to play the same in the mid to late game, but in the early game, he's definitely going to be suffering more on this W change and with this Q change. Then Volibear. Volibear is basically not a champion anymore. Nobody plays him, so let's see what they're doing. E, Majestic Roar, bonus damage versus dashing or airborne targets, 40 to 120 plus 0.3 ability power, scaling to 8% of targets max health. So I actually had to run the numbers on this one as well, and it was something that this is actually a pretty big buff to him. So E is typically a max rank for Volibear. He typically does like a W and a Q, or a Q and a W, and E is always left for last. So what you really have to look at here is this initial number, because games don't oftentimes go long enough for him to max this ability. So I ran a couple numbers and just to see if this 8% was really a big buff or not. So I assumed like a level 12 opponent, like an 80 carry, would have around 1200 to 1400 HP. So he's actually getting almost this full, he's almost getting this amount of damage. I think that the numbers came out to like 112. So it came out to almost 80 damage more, and that's just switching the damage from a scaling damage to an 8%. And then against tankier targets, like any sort of a bruiser, you know, a Sterix Gauge user, a Dead Man's Plate user, obviously this max health is going to be way more beneficial to them than just 40 damage, because this is basically negligible if you're trying to gank, say like a Darius or an Alawi or something like that. You definitely want the max health more. Our Thunderclaw's ratio up from 0.3 ability power to 0.4 ability power. Lightning Bolt on cast fires after 0.25 seconds down to 0.1 second. I don't know. So overall, these changes aren't enough to even come close to addressing the issues with Volibear. Volibear and Udyr are both run-at-you champions. The problem is that Udyr is just better in every aspect of the game. So if you want to play a simple jungler, why not Udyr? Why not Warwick? Why not anybody besides this champion? Giving him damage back on his E doesn't address his issues. Giving him 0.1 ability power on his R, when if like you ever seen a Volibear that's not ARAM who builds ability power anyways? I don't even know how he would possibly itemize into this. My only thought is maybe Rageblade, but if you're a Volibear building Rageblade, your team probably hates you anyways. Moving on, York. So Yorick is a champion who's really good at split pushing, and they're trying to balance out some of that ability and give him some team fighting ability as well. Yorick in low elo is known as like a brain dead split to win champion. It's because he really has no ability to join team fights. He's really slow, he has no terrain scaling, so his best bet at winning games is literally just to sit in a lane and beat somebody. So passive, Shepherd of Souls. Nearby enemy deaths per grave, 1284 down to 1262. This is really, really big for him, and it's going to give him a lot more agency inside of the lane, especially right here. So this effect takes place at level 7. So right after he gets his ultimate, he's now going to get his souls 2 enemy deaths quicker. So this is pretty big. Mistwalker gold down from 5 to 2. I don't understand why this change is being made. I don't know who at Riot decided that 3 gold per Mistwalker was too much to donate to anybody. Somebody was playtesting Yorick and went against Onassis and got destroyed and decided that this 3 gold was the reason why. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. So our Eulogy of the Isles, Maiden Health, from 700 to 4,000 plus 30% of Yorick's health scaling, now to 300 to 3,000 plus 70% of Yorick's health scaling. I did some light math on this one as well right here. So Yorick, assuming his health at level 11 with a Trinity Force and a Sterax, is about 2157. I know that these are common items on Yorick, but I don't know what most Yoricks are building core. I don't see a lot of them personally. So what this is going to do is give his maiden actually a lot more health. I think that this will definitely incentivize him to use this build a lot more often and maybe sneak in a Black Cleaver or something to that effect as well. His old maiden would have had about 2150. His new maiden will now have a little bit over 2500. So he's almost getting 500 or almost 400 health on the maiden, which is really, really big. And then remove Broken Bond. The maiden no longer begins autonomously pushing a lane when far from Yorick. Instead, she'll leash back to him. Yorick can now reactivate Eulogy of the Isles to set the maiden free, but can't get her back once he does. She'll push the nearest lane until she dies. So this is going to allow Yorick to ult, push a lane, and then walk over to a team fight where the maiden will follow him in, be able to deal a ton of damage, be able to soak a ton of damage, and potentially, you know, after the team fight, let's say that his team wins or something like that, he can release this ghost early, where she can just walk back to a lane and create a split push threat. So this is really, really nice for Yorick. It's just good quality of life, and it's definitely going to make him stronger. I don't think that he's going to retain any viability in higher elo, but I think that in terms of lower elo and Smurf accounts, I think that this is definitely a champion that people can start abusing. Zyra, mana regen decreased. So down from 15.335 per 5 seconds to 13 per 5 seconds. Ultimately, this isn't going to matter too much. It is going to affect the amount that she can poke in lane. However, good Zyra players are going to know how to manage their mana anyways, and I don't think that losing out on about 2.5 per 5 seconds is going to be enough to make or break this champion in the support role. She's still going to be extremely strong, and players who decide to one-trick her mid or whatever are still going to find success with that. Evelyn, quality of life and bug fixes. So you can read over these if you want. Basically, they're just changing some of the behavior on her abilities, not changing any numbers, so I don't care too much about it. These changes are nice. I think that Evelyn still requires the meta to go her way before she can be viable in anything more than solo queue right now. Right now, she's too easily abused by jungle vision. Blue plants don't help her at all. It's easy to tell where she's pathing. The perma-invis after 6 is okay, but again, that's mostly a solo queue gimmick. Competitive play, there's too much going on to gate this champion, and just quality of life or bug fixes aren't going to be enough to bring her into a meta. Kled E Jousting. Jousting through minions is no longer likely to stack them directly on top of each other. Great. Minimap targeting, Lux's Final Spark, Nami's Tidal Wave, and Aram's Mark spell is no longer able to be cast on the minimap. That's nice. Oblivion Orb going up 100 gold and down 5 ability power. This is completely okay. Champions who buy this item are not buying it for the ability power in the first place, and they don't really care too much about the gold cost. They're buying it for the magic pen. I think that mages who are looking for magic pen are going to continue to itemize into this. I think that Morellonomicon is still very good as an item. Combined cost is going down 100 gold. Ability power is going down 10 gold. I think that even losing 10 ability power, this is completely okay. Whenever you're buying Morellonomicon, you're looking for the magic pen and you're looking for the grievous wounds. And against team compositions with heavy self-healing or big self-healing threats like a Swain or a Munda, etc., you're always going to have a Morellonomicon, regardless of if it gives you ability power to extreme measures or not, because grievous wounds is just too good to not have. Sunfire Cape cost decreased, great. Taking 150 gold off Sunfire Cape isn't going to address the problems with it. The main issues with Sunfire Cape is the champions who build it. So tank split pushers were really great for about half a season. You know, the Sunfire Cape, the Iceborne, and the Xerath meta. However, due to changes within the game pacing itself, these tanks are no longer viable. Tanks are now looking to just shove out a lane and roam. They're no longer looking to sit in a lane and try and get turret damage, because turrets fall too easily with the coordinated team effort. So team fights are ultimately better for tanks to participate in rather than a split push. Moving into the runes, overheal is being changed significantly. So ally heal conversion no longer 300%, now 40 to 100% scaling, levels 1 to 18. Self-heal conversion no longer 40%, now 40% to 100% scaling at levels 1 to 18. And then shield decay, it has the same shield decay as Bloodthirster now. So after 6 seconds, it's going to decay by 2.5% of the max shield value each second. So this is going to be an overall buff to overheal in solo queue. However, there's no reason to take overheal out of the other runes in the row. So this isn't going to be a contested rune. This change isn't magically going to bring overheal to be significant. What they really need to do is take power away from the other runes if they want to push this as an option. Right now, it's just not a beneficial option. So Legend Bloodline, lifesteal per stack decreased, max stacks doubled, so lifesteal per stack now 0.8% down to 0.6%, so it's going to lose 0.2% per stack. However, max stacks is now doubling, bringing the total max lifesteal from 8% now up to 12%. Personally, I've been a fan of the Legend Bloodline for quite some time. I think that is very good in certain matchups. I think it's very good with certain itemization, and I don't always think that Alacrity is the go-to win condition for certain champions. I think that I seem to be in a minority opinion on that, but I think that this change is really, really good for Bloodline, and I think that giving an additional 4% lifesteal with an additional stacking mechanic might incentivize certain champions with certain builds to start taking this more often. I would like to see 80 carries taking this instead of Alacrity. I think that lifesteal is usually the answer to burst damage to the assassin threats coming out right now. As long as they can still heal up and stay in a fight, they don't have to completely leave after getting chunked out. So I think that this type of change is really, really healthy. Cut down. Bonus damage is now changing to a more linear scaling, or a percent-based scaling rather. So instead of 4% versus targets with 150 to 2,000 more max health than you, it's now 4% to 10% versus targets with 10% to 100% more max health on you. So ultimately, when it comes down to cut down, what you're not asking yourself is how many tanks are there on their team. It's now, can I get more value of this than coup de grace? So because champions who are going to take last stand are going to take it no matter what. They don't care about anything else. So between cut down and coup de grace, it's hard to tell. Coup de grace is going to be for champions who are more reliant on their teams to deal damage and get them past that 40% threshold. Cut down is going to be better now as an all, like versus all situation, where now you can just pick this if you're not planning on building extremely tanky yourself. Absolute focus, adaptive stats decreased. So 3 to 24 attack damage or 5 to 40 ability power levels 1 to 18, now down to 1.8 to 18 attack damage or 3 to 30 ability power levels 1 to 18. This is a really, really big nerf. This is targeted, they say, at champions who extract tons of PvE value from the bonus stacks, marksmen, and junglers. So Kindred, Twitch, Evelyn takes this as well. So this is definitely a very massive hit. The scaling is going to be 6 attack damage down or 10 ability power down, and then the level 1 values are also really big, especially the AD going from 3 to 1.8 is going to affect clear speeds of a lot of junglers. AP doesn't matter too much. There's not too many AP junglers right now, but this is a really big nerf. So maybe we'll see people incentivized to start taking other rune paths. We'll have to see how the meta shapes around this. Rune stats. So they're changing the flex rune. So adaptive damage down from 10 to 9, armor is up 5 to 6, and magic resist 6 to 8. So what they're trying to do is get people to stop itemizing damage in the flex and start incentivizing them to get either armor or MR. I like the MR going up by 2. I think that there's definitely a lot of sources of magic damage in the game now. It used to be a more rare source of damage. Now it seems to be more prevalent, so I like getting a little bit more base MR. I'd like getting a little bit more armor. It should make the games a little bit more paced and a little bit less snowbally. Adaptive damage going down by 1. This doesn't affect the damage output of any champion, but this is going to affect people psychologically whenever they go into champ select. They're setting up rune pages. Instead of seeing the double digit of 10, they're now going to see the single digit of 9. So because they're not seeing any more like increased value out of this, as in 2 digits versus 1, I think that psychologically, maybe people will be more incentivized to go either armor, MR, and the flex rune now. So we'll have to see how this affects champions. Summoner spells ignite, damage and cooldown decrease. This is something that people have been talking about for a long time, that this needs to happen, so it looks like it finally is. Damage 80 to 505, levels 1 to 18, down to 70 to 410 at levels 1 through 18. Cooldown 210 seconds down to 180 seconds. So taking 10 damage off at level 1 is pretty big. It's going to eliminate a lot of the cheese kills. It's going to eliminate the Teemo level 1, the Trendemir level 1, other champions level 1, press the attack Renekton, that type of stuff. However, they're taking a lot off in the late game. 505 down to 410, so almost 100 damage, 95 damage off at level 18. So this is a really brutal nerf in the late game to Ignite, which is fine. Ignite was never intended to be an extremely late game rune anyways. It shines especially in the mid game. However, the recent buffs to it made it really strong in the early game, so they're removing some of that early game out of it. Cooldown going down by 30 seconds is nice as well, though, because that means that it is going to be up more often. So that you really like that type of stuff in the mid game. So the game pacing, Hand of Baron, Baron buff is weaker in the early game. So scaling is linear in increments every minute. Scaling accelerates over time in increments every second. So they're really trying to affect the 20-minute Baron and the 30-minute Baron. So this is going to affect first and second Barons. This isn't going to affect anything like third Barons or anything like that if games happen to drag out that long. So attack damage is halved at the 20-minute mark, down from 24 down to 12. Ability power also halved from 40 down to 20. Mini damage reduction versus champions, 70% at all times, now 50% to 70% from 20 to 40 minutes. So it's going to take, that additional second Baron, maybe even the third Baron, to get to that full 70%, depending on when the Barons have been taken. This is nice. It's going to decrease the amount of influence that Baron has on the game, especially early Barons. The 20-minute, the 22-minute Barons, they definitely felt overpowered. Taking a 20 or a 22-minute Baron essentially meant that you could take every outer turret on the map and usually get a good push onto inhibitor turret as well. This is going to significantly reduce the impact of this on the early game Baron. However, it's going to restore this over time. So maybe they're trying to, I'm not exactly sure what this type of a change is intended to do. Just decrease the influence in the early game and maybe try to make games stretch a little bit longer, or just to incentivize players to find win conditions that don't revolve around solely controlling Baron Pit and vision around that side. Inhibitor and Nexus turrets. Resistance is 55 to 70 armor and MR from 31 to 45 minutes to now 70 armor and MR at all times. This is nice as well. Now this is going to, you get the max armor and MR values, only you get it immediately without having to wait for the 45-minute scaling. Games most of the time aren't going to 45 minutes these days anyways, especially in higher games. So you're getting this 70, basically an additional 15 resistance at the 31-minute mark. I think this is perfectly okay. A lot of people have been saying lately that turrets feel extremely weak and hard to defend, so this is definitely a buff to turrets. So jungle. Jungle is going to be the hot topic this patch, even though we've gone over, champions, items, runes, a lot of stuff happening already, but jungle is going to be the hot topic this patch. So jungle camp experience is going down. It's going down relatively significantly. XP scaling is now changing from every level to every 2 levels. So this means that junglers who prioritize, a level 2 gank or a level 2 cheese, now come back into their jungle, they get level 3. Well, now they're not getting any boosted experience for the level 4. That's now going to be missing. So I think that that's going to be the most noticeable part of this change, the level 3 to the level 4 transition. So, and in addition to this scaling, every camp is getting its experience nerfed. Not the base, but the scaling is going down, so it's going from plus 50% to plus 25%. And this is for every camp and every monster in the camp. So I did the numbers on this because I was really curious about how it would affect certain levels. So I just took it at level 7 because that's the point where camps stop scaling. So at level 7, 700 in XP is required to level up. A full clear on all of these camps, that's doing, every monster, doing every wolf, doing every raptor, doing every krug, even the lesser ones. You're only going to get 746 XP now, whereas it requires you 780 to level up. So if full clear at level 7 is no longer worth a level, if you do get the Scuttle Crab, that's still worth a pretty significant amount of XP, so now you're going to end up with 953 experience if you manage to secure a Scuttle Crab during your full clear. And then I looked at level 10. At level 10, 1080 XP is required to level up. Your full clear is still only going to grant you 746 experience. With Scuttle Crab, you're still only going to get 953 experience. So at level 10, a full clear with a Scuttle Crab is no longer going to get you level 11. So champions who are really looking for that rank 2 ultimate are going to have to find other ways to get that rather than just farming the jungle. Something of note, the old XP with this, if you happen to do a full clear and you grab a Scuttle Crab, you end up getting 1,125 experience, which is enough to bring you to that level 11 threshold. So the old level 10 junglers could just do a full clear, grab a Scuttle, pick up their level 11, rank 2 ultimate, and look to make a play with it. New junglers will not have this option available to them. So what I am thinking in terms of jungle are these bullet points right here. So number 1, this change is designed to increase the reward for successful ganks. At this point, I think that ganks are now junglers' best sources of experience. This is the formula for the amount of experience gained per kill or assist. You get 90 experience plus 50 times whatever their level was. So level 12, you're going to do 50 times 12. Level 3, you do 50 times 3. Whatever. 50 times level. So ganks are going to be a very high source of experience, and getting those kills off in lanes is going to grant you more than doing your camps at this point. So you're increasing the reward for successful ganks because you're allowing yourself to get ahead as a jungler without the aid of the jungle itself, and that's really good. However, it's also going to increase the punishment for unsuccessful ganks. So people who sit in a bush and they wait for that lane gank for 45 seconds and it never pans out and they just have to leave, that's now 45 seconds that they missed out on potentially clearing a camp, on potentially trying to contest a crab, on potentially trying to make a play in another part of the map where they could have gotten a gank off. So they're losing not only like a ton of experience from the jungle. Junglers hate having unsuccessful ganks, but also now since the camp experience has scaled so far back, you're really incentivized to get successful ganks off. So this is going to hurt you more if you cannot do that. I think that as a trend, it's going to increase the influence that laners have on jungle as a role. And the primary reason that I say that is Scuttle Crab. Now, some people have been saying that Scuttle Crab, and some people have said from the start, Scuttle Crab, since the big changes last season where it started becoming, a very valuable contested objective, people were saying that it's not that important and that people were overshooting the importance of crab. I don't think that people can overshoot the importance of crab enough at this point in the game. Even though we can see that the experience of crabs has gone down still, it's no longer scaling 100%, it's now to 80% on the gold and XP. The XP of crab is now worth more than the XP of any single camp, any quick clear. So crab has the most influence on the XP of a jungler, with the exception of ganks. So gank number 1, crab number 2, and crab is most oftentimes going to be contested in skirmishes, 2v2s, 3v3s. You're not going to see 4v4s over a crab, but the 2v2s and the 3v3s are going to pull laners away from their minions and get them into the river. So I think that if you have laners that do rotate towards your crabs and you can secure more of them, I think that that's going to put you further ahead as a jungler. If you cannot coordinate your team to come help you out with these crabs, I think that you're going to be way worse off as a jungler now. It's going to increase the value of Scuttle. I just talked about that. So this is my meta prediction based on this type of a change. This is my prediction on what's going to happen once these changes really start to settle in. So you're going to start seeing a return of the underlevel tank junglers as CC bots for teams with strong solo laners who don't need to prioritize CC. So what I mean by that is this. Carries are already very prevalent in League of Legends right now. In the meta, we're seeing a lot of damage, we're seeing a lot of bursts, we're seeing a lot of the 2v2 and 3v3 skirmishes, so you're seeing a lot of carries being played, in roles that they traditionally wouldn't be. However, I think that you're going to see now laners open up or become viable who have inconsistent or little to no CC at all. You're going to see more of the Akali champs, you're going to see more of the Tryndamere champs, you're going to see more of the Kennen champs, who usually aren't very good in these roles, but you're going to see it because they're getting the support, the CC support of their jungler. So I think that we're going to see a return to the days of, Maokai, Nautilus, Sion jungle, Sejuani jungle, any of those types of picks. I think that we're going to see less of the carry junglers. I think that we're going to see less of the Hecarim jungle, less of the Vi jungle. I think that overall this is a hit to Yi jungle not being able to get those levels and levels being worth so much gold. So I think that CC is the most reliable way to set up ganks. However, as a laner, if you prioritize CC over damage, you're going to be dealing less damage, and your jungler now is not going to be the same level in order to make that damage up for you. So I think that your jungler now has to be a lower level, but have the CC so that you as a laner do not have to have it. And then this is going to further nerf funneling. So funneling is a strategy that became popular last season, was immediately responded to by Riot. They don't seem to like this. They've said before that it's not fun, it's not engaging, and the funneling strat essentially revolves around not playing League of Legends the way that they want League of Legends to be played. I think that reducing camp experience is certainly a good way to nerf funneling. So we're going to have to see how the meta shapes around this, but that's really my two thoughts on how this is going to affect solo and competitive play. Challenging smite, damage decrease no longer grants vision of the target. So damage versus champions 60 to 162, levels 1 to 18, now down to 48 to 125 at levels 1 to 18. So this is a 12 damage hit at level 1 and a 47 damage hit at max level. So that's a lot of damage that you're missing out. I think that challenging smite is going to start falling out of favor with champions who can't correctly use it. What I mean by that is this. Sometimes you get situations with tank junglers where people don't see a value in blue smite because these tanks have such good stickiness to targets that instead they just take red smite for a little bit of extra damage. Examples of this would be Rammus, Amumu, these types of tanks who can stick on a target and really just stay on them forever. So they take the challenging smite just to deal a little bit more damage over time to them because those champions typically lack damage in their kits. I think that we're going to be seeing less of this and have those junglers just prioritizing blue smite just because challenging smite is no longer dealing quite as much damage. And then Challenging Smite no longer grants vision of the target while the effect is active. This is also going to hit some assassin junglers as well, maybe with the exception of Rengar, because he thrives when you're using bush play and that type of stuff. But otherwise, whenever you have somebody like Evelynn or a Twitch or something like that directly come into your lane, usually if you can sidestep into a brush for the duration of Challenging Smite, in the past, you'd be able to still see that champion and still get those autos off because of Challenging Smite. It essentially functioned like an auto ward in the bush if you didn't have one up, or if you started Sweeper, something like that. However, Challenging Smite no longer granting vision is really going to hurt those types of Evelynn Twitch junglers. So even Vi, to an extent, if she's using Q, she could use Smite to grab that vision. You step into a bush, she can still ult you. That type of combo is no longer going to be available. So this is really going to affect the ability of laners to get away from ganks. And I think that because of that, these types of junglers will start taking Blue Smite just as a measure to secure CC and secure a gank and maybe be able to at least chunk out more damage before they can force a flash. Have some bugs fixes here. Not going to go through all of those. I don't see anything super important throughout them. Upcoming skins, so that's fine. So this was a really big patch, a lot of stuff here in 9.2. Really excited to see this type of patch. Really hope that Riot does more of these patches this season. I know after 8.11, they were really hesitant to release massive patches, and we basically didn't get one for the rest of Season 8. I would really love to see more massive patches like this in Season 9. I love seeing all these changes. I love being able to speculate on the meta, and I love this stuff. So Silas out this patch as well. New champions, everyone knows new champions are always broken. So if you are trying to start that ranked grind already, perm ban this guy if you're not already perm banning Nico, or if you're not still perm banning Akali or Irelia or Aatrox or Urgot or any of these champions we see 1,000 times a day.